Lysenko, spokesperson of Analytical Center of Security and Defense Council. He will inform you about ATO events. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. The situation in Donetsk and Luhansk regions has a stable trend to complication. Ukrainian military men monitor a movement of Russian military equipment with terrorist insignia to the demarcation zone. There is a concentration of Russian units, military units, continuous anti-aircraft brigades along the border between Ukraine and Russia. The highest military activity is observed in Luhansk direction. From great system and mortars, they shelled two checkpoints of Ukrainian armed forces near Stanitsa Luhansk. Positions near Vilhova, Shastia, Kryakivka was shelled with great system 60 times. Checkpoints near Aidar and Terasol, they shelled with mortars and small arms. Our armed forces fought back near Sokelnika. The enemy has losses on Pervomansk direction from great system and mortars. Gunmen shelled two checkpoints of National Guards near Krymsk and checkpoint of armed forces of Ukraine near Frunze. With mortars, they shelled positions near Zolota, and Russian occupants shall fire military men and also civilians. Yesterday at 6 o'clock near the border with Russia, on Milova, terrorists from the forest, they shelled border guards unit and they used a grenade launcher. Border guards fought back and the group of infiltrators retreated. And militants shelled Donetsk airport using different mortars and grenade launchers. The same was done near Piske, Opetne, Troitske, Avdiivka, and Slavna. Ukrainian military men give a decent answer, and here's a video for your attention, and you see that how Ukrainian tank in airport hits gunmen. It hit the target. This is the way they. This is the result. Near the battle, Russian hitmen they were shelling ITO forces near Nikishina, Debaltseve, Kamenka, Mayorske, and Donetsk. On Mariupol direction, gunmen with mortars and small arms, they shelled checkpoints of ATO near Mykolaiv, Kolarlivsk, and Shevchenko. And a grenade was shelled by terrorists, and near Polopoli there was activity of two drones of our enemy. During the last day, we lost 4 military men, 19 were wounded. President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, had a meeting on prosthesis of those who were wounded in ATO area. The head of the state authorized Minister of Foreign Affairs, Pavlo Klink, and his advisor, Olga Bobnadze, to provide treatment abroad to 12 patients, and it's impossible to develop a prosthesis for them. They require very complicated and modern technologies of prosthesis, and it's when Victims lost both limbs and pelvis. And they told that it can be financed in the cost of trust funds, and it was agreed during the summit of NATO summit in Newport. The president authorized the Minister of Foreign Affairs to speak to NATO structures to establish a neuro-rehabilitation center in Ukraine. The situation in living areas in ATO. There is more shelling against the civil residential areas in Donetsk and in other towns and villages. And Granitna and Telmensky district was shelled. In Luhansk region during yesterday they were shelling upon Shastia. They used mortars to shell Krymsk, Troinsk near Zolota. Because of the explosion of mines and shells, 57-year-old and 80-year-old residents of Zolota were wounded, and they are in a hospital now. The most tense situation is observed in Stanitsa, Luhansk, and terrorists shelled it 80 times using mortars, artillery, and small arms. As a result, they damaged kindergarten number 2 and some private houses in Molodizhny's quarter and block. And they destroyed some apartments, 5 buildings, multi-story buildings were destroyed. Battles continue. Today, gunmen, they destroyed, damaged school and also power lines. So that's why there are 10 streets of that district town are without power. Yesterday, on the checkpoints in Donetsk region, they stopped a citizen of Ukraine and his car. So they checked his document. He was arrested because he suspected that he organized a illegal referendum on May 11. He was handed to the Ministry of Interior. In Vinnytsia, Security Service of Ukraine arrested a member of a terrorist organization of DNR. And he, from Vinnytsia region, he belonged to a gang, Kalmius, and participated in attacks against Ukrainian armed forces in Donetsk region. They found a grenade. He was informed about that. He suspected that he committed crimes according to Article 258 terrorist acts, and according to Criminal Code of Ukraine. Yesterday on checkpoint near Donetsk post, we arrested a car with 2 Russian militarymen who came to fight on the side of terrorists. One of the tasks was to collect information about terrorists and to hand it to the center of training of gunmen in Donetsk. They, by chance, they got on Ukrainian blog post, and they thought that the representatives of terrorists arrested them, and only later they saw that there was a Ukrainian flag. Both Russians were handed to a security service of Ukraine. We have exclusive video near Russian citizens of Russia were arrested. One of them came from Murmansk to fight in Donbass. They have not introduced themselves, and by mistake they went to a wrong road. One of them didn't have documents at all, and the other one had everything, up to trade unions, ticket and military ticket, and resident of Murmansk. And here's a special task to collect data from militarymen and send it to the train center of gunmen. He gave up that information because he thought that that was their people checking them, and then he saw Ukrainian flag.
Have you thought that it's what? Russian? You thought it's Russian? Which flag should that be? Stop talking. During the search, several times the person with the signal call Odessa was calling the mobile phone of the detained person. He was talking about how they are have in Donetsk, we have the commander of a training center. What is he doing, this commander? Is he helping children or is he killing his brothers? You came from Murmansk and there's all the evidence. Why are you here? Thank you. These got lost. You understand where Murmansk is and where Donetsk is. And we are grateful to our colleagues journalists for providing this video to us, their own video, and we are ready to provide our video, so we thank you. Yesterday in Donetsk and Lugansk, there were mass protests of local pensioners who were accusing the leaders of so-called Donetsk and Lugansk republics in deterioration of social conditions of life and the lack of and not paying the pensions from new authorities. We would like to remind that all the social payments for the citizens of Ukraine, the citizens in the temporarily occupied by terrorist territories, will be taking place on the territories controlled by Ukrainian authorities. They will be accrued all the payments which they have to receive, and this will be either on they will be able to receive payments either on the liberated territories of Donbass or at the place of registration in other regions of Ukraine. International support. On Wednesday, on the 12th of November, there was the meeting of the Council of Security of United Nations about the situation in Ukraine. The assistant to the General Secretary of the UN, Jens Stoltenberg, stated that the international organization is afraid of possible renewal of active military actions in Ukraine. At the same time, the permanent representative of Ukraine, Yuri Sergeyev, stated that the open war in the east of Ukraine has not started because of the restraint of Ukraine. We preserve the adherence to peaceful settlement of Minsk agreements, and we call Russia to do the same. Also, Sergeyev stated that the militants are in the way of the mission of OSCE and they cannot execute their monitoring of the border. The representative of Lithuania, Raimonda Murmukaitė, stated that Russia is conducting the undeclared war in Ukraine. It commented that there are intentions of Russian Ministry of Defense to increase the number of flights of aircraft bomb carriers. Samantha Power stated that Russia is only talking about the peace, but at the same time is supporting the military actions. The government of Switzerland increased the sanctions against Russia because of the situation in Ukraine. Switzerland introduced some restrictions on placement of the securities of 5 state banks of Ukraine, which are under the sanctions of the EU, to issue the long-term financial instruments. They will have to receive permit, and that was done so that the territory of Switzerland is not used to circumvent the sanctions introduced by the European Union against Russia because of the situation in Ukraine. The General Secretary of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, called Russia to withdraw their troops and military equipment from Russia and stick to Minsk agreements. According to the assessment of alliance, the increase of military capacity in the east of Ukraine that was informed about includes Russian artillery, tanks, the systems of anti-aircraft defense and the troops. This is the serious threat to this ceasefire, stated Stoltenberg. And the OSCE continues to fix the movement of the columns of artillery and heavy vehicles which enter the territory of the buffer zones. The monitoring mission of OSCE informed that during the last week at the Russian checkpoints Gukov and Donetsk, there was fixed the cross of border by the groups of persons in military uniforms, and also that they transported to Russia the 200 cargo and coal to Russian Federation from the occupied territories. The General Secretary of OSCE, Lambert Zanier, informed about the threat of breaking Minsk agreements They are demonstrated only what the terrorists are interested in. According to Zenier, the monitors of OSCE do not control Ukrainian-Russian border. Their presence at two checkpoints at two passing points is political, because now only 4 kilometers of border are under supervision of monitors, and more than 400 kilometers are controlled by militants. At the same time, Ritugula Bakan stated that OSCE is ready to expand its mission on the border between Ukraine and Russia. The General Secretary of OSCE, Lamberto Zenier, informed about the possibility of military attack on Mariupol. Mariupol is the territory where the shellings are the strongest, and this could be the preparation of military operations, he stated. He also informed that authorities of Crimea closed the office of OSCE, and they do not allow the observers to go back there, and that creates problem for Crimean Tatars. In Crimea, we cannot act to protect this minority which is under threat. We cannot ensure its protection, said Zenier. At the same time, yesterday, the President Poroshenko discussed the situation in Crimea with the leader of Crimean Tatar people, Mustafa Dzhemilev. They discussed also the possibility of creating the Crimean Tatar battalion in the southern direction. Now, about 450 Crimean Tatars participate in different military battalions in anti-terrorist operation in Donbass, including at the front line. Euro Commissioner on EU enlargement, Johansen Gunn, stated that the latest actions of Russian Federation in the east of Ukraine caused the present position of European Union, according to which there will be no reduction of sanctions against Russia. Euro Commission transferred to the account of Russia 260 million euros of macrofinancial assistance, which adds up to 600 million euros received under the two programs of macrofinancial assistance of European Union to Ukraine. May I ask the question?
Could you explain from the information that you provided to us? NATO confirms that the regular troops of Russia are on the territory of Ukraine. Western leaders recognize that in Ukraine there is an undeclared, unannounced war, and they warn on influences from different directions. The Minister of Defense gave an order to prepare to the war, and at the same time we speak about a ceasefire. How long Ukraine will stick to the ceasefire? We don't have ceasefire. We have that is the agreement achieved in Minsk, and it was signed by the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and EU. Ukraine complies with those agreements, and we only fight back if there are attacks. We are ready to comply with that agreement, and despite all possible and impossible efforts to disrupt those agreements by Russian Federation, by military acts and provocations, we comply with those agreements, and we don't want them to be disrupted. And that will, but an intention. There is no intention to stop complying with the Minsk agreement. Is there any other question? Georgia TV company. Yesterday there was a statement by a NATO representative, and they told that Russian troops move to Ukraine. Could you give us information to journalists, foreign journalists, how many Russian equipment move vehicles across the Ukrainian-Russian border? Do you have any confirmation, like photos taken from satellites? Thank you. Thank you for your question. You see, Russian mercenaries that arrive from Russian Federation, they added by units of regular armed forces of Russia, and they arrive also to the territory of Ukraine, and we have confirmation, and And from those arrested Russian militarymen, they first of all they say that they lost their way, then they told that they were here on vacations, and then they don't say anything. But we have them here. What do we do with that? We have, we know approximately how many units of armed vehicles and how many anti-craft systems they have, and but that information, our general staff has that, and they calculate our capabilities and to give a decent answer if there is an open aggression. Austrian TV. If could you provide for Austrian TV, Ukrainian? I respect you speak Ukrainian. If you can prevent, are the activities more intensive? Do you have information that maybe Russia prepares a new attack against Mariupol and Lugansk? Because that's very interesting. If I see they prepare new attacks, as I understand. There are three main directions where there could be an offensive: Luhansk direction, Debaltsevo, and Donetsk. At the same time, we understand that there is one more direction in the south, because they are not as powerful there. But we know that there's a big group and tanks, artillery, and every day we observe drones there. So they collect intelligence there. And it's clear that where there is intelligence and where there are infiltration groups, that's where it's possible that there will be a real offense of the enemy. We observe that also, that activity near Donetsk, near Stanitsa Luhanska. And here. And Debaltsevo. Just for your understanding, why I would like to explain why. Because Stanitsa Luhanska, that is the nearest port to the border with the Russian Federation, and that's where gunmen receive the biggest support. You don't need to move the troops far away, because they are already on the territory of Russian Federation. Donetsk direction. There is, in particular, I speak about Donetsk airport. That could be a strategic location to collect all the troops, vehicles. The runoff is not damaged, and so planes can land there, so they can move their forces capabilities pretty quick. Also, a strategic place is Debaltsevo. On the map, we cannot see it, but that is quite a big railroads hub which connects Luhansk and Donetsk regions. And through Luhansk and through that open border, they can move their capabilities. That's where we have fortifications, and despite a daily shelling, our militarymen hold those positions and prevent attacks. They destroyed units of gunmen, and also the first line of defense was already built, including Mariupol, where it is expected an offense of the enemy is expected. So a lot of work is done every day. Nobody is in waiting, including our enterprise that repair our equipment. So there's a lot of work done by the Ministry of Defense, and the Minister of Defense, he told that the Ukrainian troops don't stop. They are trained. They go through trainings because we understand how real that aggression is, and that accumulation of military forces in the east of Ukraine, that's a real threat. We should be ready to that. And in addition to those units on this line, we have reserve troops and that are trained at night and day, and they are ready to anything to provide assistance. So we are ready to defend.
Today there has been information that Ukrainian military disguised as separatists called the militants Kalmius, and they were complaining the condition. They were saying that they are separatists, it's difficult for them to work at one of the checkpoints, and two leaders told them that just wait till Sunday, because on Sunday there will be offense. Do you know about possible offense of separatists in this direction on Sunday? There's a lot of information about possible dates of offense of Russian terrorist groups. They were talking about adherence of Russia to some significant dates, like the 7th of November, and also, as you mentioned, Sunday was mentioned. But we cannot forecast when. We have to be ready all the time. One more question? No more. Okay, there's one more. Ukraine channel, TV channel. The question is about the moving of budget organizations from Donetsk Oblast, schools, hospitals, communal companies, are they included into that? And will people who work there be evacuated? It's about the organizations which provide to the population everything necessary for life, social services, banks, everything which is under state administration, everything that operates to provide, to support the life of people, including payments, because banking institutions, social institutions which provide social support, they were especially attacked by terrorists, and they took everything possible away from that, the money, the equipment, and that makes impossible their operation on the territory occupied by terrorists. So that is why the decision was made for them to continue their functioning so that they have some status. The decision was made to move them to the territory controlled by Ukrainian authorities. And that means that local citizens are not left without attention. We provide consultative assistance to them, how they can move, how they can go away from there. The displaced people are provided with the transportation to, there's the possibility to provide accommodations for them. Today, Ukraine can accommodate 15,000 displaced persons. So 4 transit points are operating, which are ready to accommodate people. The work on protecting our citizens continues, and that is why the decision was made to move away all such institutions outside of the territory which is under the control of the terrorists. Associated Press, could you please tell how many Russian servicemen and pro-Russian mercenaries are on the occupied territory of Donbass, and how many pieces of military equipment are there? Talking about percentage, maybe. We don't have the exact numbers about how many of them. There are many of them, the equipment and the mercenaries and so-called rebels. But all these calculations are, well, the military leadership of Ukraine has all these numbers, and we are ready to meet irrespective of how many of them are there. Once you have no more questions, thank you. The next press briefing is according to the agenda. Tomorrow now we will have a very interesting roundtable as to getting Ukrainian citizenship for Russian citizens who disagree with Putin's policy.